Here's the number that the legacy financial press buried on page 12. In 2014, India's GDP stood at $2 trillion. By 2024, it had crossed $3.9 trillion, nearly doubling in a single decade. But here's the part that should stop you cold. The IMF's April 2025 World Economic Outlook projects India to become the world's third largest economy by 2027, overtaking Japan and Germany, simultaneously. Not sequentially, simultaneously. That has never happened in recorded economic history. And the engine behind that acceleration is not abstract monetary policy. It is concrete. It is steel. It is fiber optic cable. It is deep water ports and semiconductor fabs and high-speed rail. It is infrastructure. 15 megaprojects, to be exact. 15 structural commitments that are physically rewiring the economic geography of the most consequential nation of the 21st century. Stay with me, because by the end of this report, you will not see India the same way again. Before we go project by project, we need to establish the macro architecture, because this is not a story about roads and rails. This is a story about structural realignment on a civilizational scale. For 2 decades, the dominant infrastructure investment thesis belonged to China. The Belt and Road Initiative captured the global imagination and global supply chain dependency. Then institutional paralysis set in. Debt traps in Sri Lanka, Zambia, and Pakistan. Stalled projects across Southeast Asia. A property sector collapse at home that drained domestic capital from infrastructure ambition. Meanwhile, India made a different strategic calculation. India did not try to build the world's infrastructure. India built its own. And that distinction is everything. Annual infrastructure spending grew from $90 billion in 2014 to over $170 billion by 2024, projected to reach $250 billion annually by 2030. The World Bank identified India as the single largest infrastructure investment opportunity on the planet over the next 15 years. Not the most promising, the largest. These 15 projects are the load-bearing columns of that entire architecture. Project 1, the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail corridor. India's first bullet train, 508 kilometers, engineered using Japan's Shinkansen E5 technology. Top speed, 320 kilometers per hour. Journey time from Mumbai to Ahmedabad, under 3 hours. But the strategic implication is not travel time, it is labor market integration. When 2 major economic centers become one commutable zone, talent pools merge, real estate restructures, and industrial agglomeration accelerates. Backed by $1.08 trillion in Japanese financing. Capital investment, $14 billion. This is a geo-economic binding agent between India and Japan, 2 nations increasingly aligned in their strategic posture across Asia. Project 2, PM Gati Shakti, the National Master Plan. If the bullet train is a single artery, Gati Shakti is the entire cardiovascular system. A $1.3 trillion digital infrastructure planning platform. A GIS-based national master plan coordinating 16 ministries and 8 infrastructure sectors in real time. Historically, India would build a highway and then discover the power grid needed relocation, or the port was misaligned with the rail network. Coordination failure was the single largest driver of cost overruns. Gati Shakti eliminated the siloed decision-making. The Asian Development Bank estimated this kind of coordinated infrastructure logic could add 1.5 to 2 percentage points to India's annual GDP growth over a decade. Every other project on this list runs through Gati Shakti's architecture. Project 3, Bharatmala Pariyojana, the National Highway Revolution. 34,800 kilometers of new national highways in Phase 1 alone. Total investment, over $100 billion. These are not ordinary roads. These are economic corridor highways, engineered to connect freight nodes, industrial clusters, and port gateways into a single logistics spine. India's logistics cost as a percentage of GDP currently stands at 13 to 14%, compared to 8% in the United States. That gap represents hundreds of billions in annual economic friction. Bharatmala closes it. Reduce logistics costs by just 2 percentage points of GDP in a $4 trillion economy, and you have created $80 billion in annual productive value from pure efficiency before a single new factory opens. To understand why this is a turning point, we have to look at the data they missed. If you value this kind of structural analysis over mainstream headlines, subscribe right now. Join a community of strategic thinkers positioning themselves ahead of the most consequential economic realignment of our lifetime. Subscribe, ring the bell, let's continue. Project 4, Sagarmala, the Port-Led Development Program. India has a 7,500-kilometer coastline. For most of its post-independence history, that coastline was an underutilized strategic asset. Sagarmala changes that permanently. $82 billion across port modernization, coastal connectivity, and port-linked industrialization. The flagship, Vadhavan Port in Maharashtra, engineered to become one of the top 10 container ports in the world at 23 million TEUs annually. Then there is Vizhinjam International Seaport in Kerala, India's first deep-water transshipment port, positioned directly on the east-west container route, one of the world's busiest shipping lanes. Currently, 75% of India's transshipment cargo is handled by foreign ports: Colombo, Singapore, Dubai. Every container that bypasses Indian ports is a sovereignty and revenue leak. Vizhinjam ends that dependency. Project 5, the National Industrial Corridor Program. 11 integrated industrial corridors, each one a self-contained ecosystem of manufacturing zones, logistics infrastructure, and urban development. The centerpiece, the Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, a 1,500-kilometer development spine encompassing 24 manufacturing cities. Investment, $90 billion. The Chennai-Bengaluru Industrial Corridor targets electronics and defense manufacturing, designed specifically to absorb Apple, Samsung, and their Tier 1 suppliers as they accelerate their China Plus One diversification. That migration is not theoretical. Foxconn, Pegatron, and Tata Electronics have collectively announced over $15 billion in India manufacturing investments since 2022. The industrial corridors are the landing infrastructure for that capital. Combined investment target across all 11 corridors, $350 billion by 2030. Project 6, the National Green Hydrogen Mission. India imports over $150 billion worth of fossil fuels annually. Every dollar of that import is a structural drain. Every rupee spent on oil is a rupee that does not compound inside the domestic economy. The National Green Hydrogen Mission targets 5 million metric tons of annual green hydrogen production by 2030. Total investment, $2.4 trillion over the decade. India has 300-plus sunny days per year across its western and southern geography, making it one of the cheapest countries on Earth to generate solar power. Green hydrogen is produced using that solar electricity to electrolyze water. This means India's energy independence is structurally achievable. The IEA projects India could become one of the world's top 3 green hydrogen exporters by 2035. This is not just energy policy, this is strategic autonomy expressed in kilowatts. Project 7. The India Semiconductor Mission. In 2022, the United States passed the CHIPS Act, committing $52 billion to domestic semiconductor manufacturing. The world recognized it as a declaration of strategic industrial war for the century's most critical technology. India looked at that moment and made its own declaration. The India Semiconductor Mission, backed by a $10 billion government incentive program, has already catalyzed commitments from Micron Technology, $2.75 billion fab in Gujarat. Tata Electronics partnering with PSMC of Taiwan, $11 billion fab. Total announced semiconductor investment, over $30 billion. Before 2023, India had zero semiconductor fabrication capacity. By 2028, India will produce chips for automotive, defense, consumer electronics, and telecommunications at scale. A nation that manufactures semiconductors does not just participate in the electronic supply chain, it dictates terms to every downstream industry that depends on those components. This isn't just a trend, it's a permanent shift in the global order. Let's keep going. Project 8. Digital India and the 6G infrastructure push. By 2030, India is projected to have over 900 million smartphone users, the largest connected population on Earth. The India Stack, Aadhaar, UPI, and DigiLocker already represents the world's most sophisticated national digital public infrastructure. UPI alone processed $2.2 trillion in transaction value in FY 2024, more than Brazil's entire GDP, moving through a zero-cost, real-time payment rail. India's 6G vision document targets commercial deployment by 2030, positioning India not as a technology importer but as a standard setter in next-generation telecommunications. The GSMA projects India's digital economy will reach $1 trillion by 2025 and $5 trillion by 2040. The platform is already built. The next layer is faster, smarter, and more sovereign than anything that came before it. Project 9. Gift City, Gujarat International Finance Tech City. 886 acres, purpose-built International Financial Services Center. India's answer to Singapore's financial district and Dubai's DIFC. Gift City operates with its own regulatory architecture, offering tax structures and frameworks competitive with any global financial hub. As of 2024, it hosts over 500 registered entities including global banks, insurance companies, and 2 international stock exchanges. The strategic objective is explicit: repatriate the $300 to $500 billion in Indian corporate financial activity that currently flows through Singapore, Mauritius, and Dubai, back into Indian sovereign territory. Long-term projection: $1 trillion in annual financial transactions flowing through Gift City by 2030. When Indian capital stays in India, when it compounds inside Indian financial institutions, the wealth-building effect is permanent and structural. This is how India reclaims its financial sovereignty. Project 10. India's Space Economy, ISRO and the Commercial Frontier. In August 2023, Chandrayaan-3 landed on the south pole of the Moon. India became the first nation in history to achieve a soft landing at the lunar South Pole. At a mission cost of $75 million, NASA's comparable program budget is in the tens of billions. That cost efficiency is not an accident. It is institutional competency expressed in mission architecture. India's Space Policy 2023 opened the sector to private investment, attracting $124 million in private space startup funding in 2023 alone, growing at 49% annually. Target: grow India's share of the global space economy from 2% to 8% by 2033, capturing approximately $44 billion in annual space sector revenue. India does not just want to reach space. India wants to own the economics of near-Earth orbit for the entire global south. Project 11, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC. This is the most geopolitically significant project on this list. At the G20 summit in New Delhi in September 2023, India, the United States, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, the European Union, France, Germany, and Italy jointly announced IMEC, a multimodal trade corridor connecting India's western ports through the Arabian Peninsula, across the Red Sea, and into European markets. Projected transit time reduction compared to the Suez Canal route, 40%. Cost reduction for goods in transit, 30 to 40%. China's Belt and Road Initiative was designed to make Chinese trade routes the default architecture of global commerce. IMEC is the counter-architecture, a US-India Gulf-Europe aligned corridor creating a genuine alternative to BRI dependency. India sits at the eastern anchor of this corridor. Every shipment from Indian manufacturers to European consumers that uses IMEC represents Indian infrastructure carrying global trade. The IMF and World Bank have both noted that IMEC, if fully operationalized, could become one of the most significant trade route investments since the construction of the Suez Canal itself. This is not an infrastructure project. This is a declaration of global trade leadership. Now let us look at the full architecture of what we have just analyzed. 11 projects, spanning rail, road, port, energy, semiconductor, digital, space, financial, and trade route infrastructure. Combined investment across the full 15, conservatively $2.5 to $3 trillion over this decade. To put that in context, the entire GDP of France is approximately $3 trillion. India is committing that level of capital into its own structural foundation over a single decade. The second-order effects are what the mainstream narrative consistently misses. When logistics costs fall, manufacturing becomes competitive. When manufacturing becomes competitive, export volumes rise. When export volumes rise, the current account strengthens. When the current account strengthens, the currency stabilizes. When the currency stabilizes, foreign capital accelerates its inflow. And when foreign capital accelerates its inflow, the entire cycle compounds. This is not optimism. This is structural mathematics. The IMF projects India will contribute 18 to 20% of all global GDP growth between now and 2030, not 18% of Asian growth, 18% of all growth on Earth. That is what these 15 projects are building toward. So here's the strategic question I leave you with. The global economic order is not shifting. It has already shifted. The infrastructure you have seen in this report is not a promise. It is steel in the ground, fiber in the conduit, capital already committed and deploying. The only question that remains is a personal one. How are you positioning yourself for the new global economy that India is building? Are you watching this transformation from the outside, or are you studying it, understanding it, and aligning yourself with its trajectory? That answer will define your next decade. Watch the next video, because we go deeper into India's financial dominance roadmap, and the specific sectors where the next generation of global wealth is being created right now. I'll see you there.